بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وحده، والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده، وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين، وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد. As we continue in this tremendous treatise entitled Ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani, rahimahullah, the great Imam who died in the 4th century, where he's mutawaffa sanata 386, he died 386 after the hijrah of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. His kunya was Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani, rahimahullah. For the time now, everyone, this day is Wednesday. The time is 7:22 p.m., Thursday, August the 10th, 2023, which coincides with the Hijri calendar, or the Hijri date rather, al-Tarikh al-Islami and the Hijri, which currently the 22nd of Muharram, the year 1445, after the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. As we started the new chapter, everyone, the chapter where the great Imam, after he explained his intention of why he wrote this tremendous beneficial treatise, and that it was actually for the youth, even though the whole ummah, regardless of their age, can benefit and learn the proper aqidah in this tremendous great work that he put forth for the ummah. And as we finalize the introduction, now we start the actual book itself of the affairs that explains the aqidah, the creed of the people of prominence who obtain success in this world and success in the grave and success in the hereafter. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us and you from them, meaning people who attain prominence, who are successful in this world, as well as in the hereafter. We talked about the affairs and the benefits of these gatherings. As these gatherings, inshallah, they're for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that one can attain the reward of Hajj, or similar to the reward of Hajj, as we talked about the narration. And that is from the merits of these type of gatherings. That if it's for Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will mention them with the angels. And that the angels will descend upon these type of gatherings, in addition to one attaining the reward similar to the reward of Hajj, as we mentioned in last class. So we start in the chapter, or the new chapter rather, where you'll find that the great Imam that he puts, or some of the ulamas, they put the heading, as it says, باب ما تنطق به الألسنة وتعتقده الأفئدة من واجب أمور الديانة. As you'll find that the heading, you'll find of the ulama who put service, or rather they service this book. Some of them put their own headings in the book. And you'll find from them, as the great Imam Shaykh Salih Fawzan, hafidhahullah wa ra'ah, you'll find that he put the heading by saying the chapter of what the tongue utters and what the heart believes from the obligations of the affairs of the religion. So we'll start in that chapter, which is the beginning, inshallah. So he goes on by saying what the great Imam Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani. If you look in your books, everyone, what page is it in your book? Who is?
14.
Page 14. That's in the translated book, right? J. Darasunnah. No problem. طيب. He says, من ذلك الإيمان بالقلب. He said, from that is having faith with the heart. So the belief, everyone, its place is of the heart. And that the creed and the rectification of a human being, that it starts with rectifying their heart. About the qalb. And we'll talk about how the heart is the source of guidance in regards to what is implemented by the limbs and what is uttered by the tongue. So rectification starts by rectification of the heart. So he mentions, it says that iman bil qalb. So i'tiqad or creed is of the heart. Then he goes on to say, and what is uttered by the tongue, وَالنُّطْقُ بِاللِّسَانِ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ إِلَهُ وَحْدٌ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one deity of worship. None has the right to be worshipped other than Him. There's nothing similar to Him. There is not a resembler or anyone that resembles Him. He has no child. وَلَا وَلَدَ لَهُ. We'll talk about all these beneficial lines and explain each one, inshaAllah. وَلَا وَلَدَ لَهُ. Now this is very important. He has no children. وَلَا وَالِدَ لَهُ. He has no father or anyone that gave him birth or anyone that made him born. He was not begotten nor was he begotten. وَلَا صَاحِبَةَ لَهُ. He has no female partner. وَلَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ. And he has no sharik, he has no partner. لَيْسَ لِأَوَّلِيَّتِهِ ابْتِدَاء. Him being the first, he has no beginning. Or he is the first, there is no beginning to him. And he is the last, there is no ending to him. وَلَا لِآخِرِيَّتِهِ انْقِضَاء. It is nothing, as we said, for him being the last, no ending. So you'll find that the great Imam that he starts everyone. If you look at your book, we said this page 14 in Dar es-Salaam, right everyone? 14? Right. So those are the lines that we started by mentioning. The proper creed in regards to what the great Imam mentions. So he says, these type of matters, of course, inaugurating his book by clarifying to the people their proper creed in regards to how Iman comprises of these key elements and these fundamentals. Right. So now, these are what is an obligation for one to embrace fully and not to have any reluctancy in grasping what he mentioned here. And you'll find that these matters are agreed upon by, number one, by all the prophets and messengers. So it's not just a matter of creed in regards to us or to the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is the creed of all the prophets and messengers. All the prophets and messengers came with rectification of the heart. And all of them came with iman of uttering by the tongue. And all of them came with the affair that Allah is one. None has the right to be worshipped except Him. And there is nothing similar to Him, nothing resembling Him. He does not have any children, does not have any female partners, or does He have a partner at all. This is the belief of all the prophets and messengers. And this is what they were sent with, to teach the people these factors, these beliefs, because their success started with these fundamentals here. And this is from the obligation or compulsory affairs for every human being to learn. These are affairs, like we said, that one unites upon. That the whole ummah, if they want to restore honor and they want to restore the matter which the previous nations of before were upon, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them dominant and made them to be from the prominent and the great creation of the earth, that it all started with these matters first. And that the affair of Rububiyyah and Uluhiyyah, the Asma' al-Sifat, was the foundation of all these matters, and their prominence started from this point. So we talked about last class, and I'm sure that everyone listening is familiar with the affairs of the different categories of the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That everyone knows about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's lordship. And when you say lordship, what should come to one's mind is Allah's actions. Just to keep it basic. Lordship means Allah's actions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving death and life, or life and death, it doesn't matter the order. Life and death, creation and sending down the rain, of course, provisions to the end. Then you know, of course, the affairs connected with the uluhiyah of Allah, which is His worship. That Allah being singled out in His worship, which is the actions of who everyone? The servants. Because worship is an act of us that we utilize because we know of Allah's Lordship, and as a reason of one believing that Allah is the Lord of everything. And when we say Lord, meaning His actions, we worship Him. And worship is an action of the servant himself. Then you have the affairs connected with His asma wa sifat, the names and attributes of Allah, which will explain all these matters momentarily. In addition to what every prophet and messenger had taught their ummah, was all these matters. A person would say, this is only for the ummah of Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam. No, all of the prophets believed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was Ar-Rabb, and that He deserved to be worshipped, and that He had names and attributes. This was the creed of all the prophets and messengers, not just the final prophet to all humanity, Muhammad bin Abdullah alayhi salatu wasalam. This was what all the prophets believed, that Allah, that He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that can give life, give death. He's the one that provides, sustains. He's the one that gives life to the earth after it becomes dead during those seasons, or during the winter season, or the winter solstice. You'll find that the earth, that the plants die, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revives the life after that particular time elapses. And that's all from His actions, which all the prophets and the messengers believed. Then, as a result of that belief that Allah has these actions, the people single Him out in His worship, which is the uluhiyah of Allah. Or if you want to call it ibadah. Or if you want to call it ilahiyah. Or if you want to call it tawheed al-talab al-qasd, as Ibn Abee Zayd mentions in some of his books. But it's all of them are names for one affair, which is the worship of Allah. وَلَا مَشَاحَةَ فِي الْإِصْطِلَاحِ. But you'll find that Ahl-Ilm, that they give it these names, and they're all the same. You could call it uluhiyah, you could call it ibadah, you could call it ta'abbud, you could call it tawheed al-talab al-qasd, you could call it ilahiyah. All of them are musammayat or asma li musamman wahid. They're all names for one thing, or one affair. But at any rate, the point of what we wanted to mention here is that this is an affair of all the prophets and messengers. All of them believed that Allah was the one Lord, and that Allah is the only one that deserves to be worshipped, and that Allah has those names and attributes. That was an affair of all the prophets and the messengers. Rather, it wasn't just an affair of all the prophets and messengers. It was also an affair of even the angels, as the angels believe that Allah is Ar-Rabb, and the angels unify Him in His worship, and they single Him out in worship. And that the angels also believe in His names and attributes. And these are the affairs of those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed. That all of them believe in this creed that we'll explain right now, inshallah. You'll find that the great Imam Ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani, rahimahullah, from the affairs that's obligatory upon the Muslim, like we said, is rectification of the heart. That affair of these statements that you look at your book, everyone, those affairs are from what they call qawlul qalb. So you have two categories. You have what they call, number one, qawlul qalb, the statement of the heart. And then you have the second category, which is called the amal al-qalb, the actions of the heart. You'll find that some of Ahl-Ilm that they mention and say the first category is what they call the statement of the heart. The statement of the heart, everyone, is the creed. It's the creed that we're going to mention right now. From those matters, for example, of what they call statement of the heart, is that Allah is one deity deserving of worship. أَنَّ اللَّهَ إِلَهُ وَاحِدٌ لَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ. That Allah is the deity of worship only. or one deity of worship. There is no other deity along with him. That is from what they call qawlul qalb. It's from the belief or the creed of the heart. The statement of the heart is that Allah is one deity deserving of worship. No, there is no other deity other than him. Then you have the affair with the great Imam that he mentions, as we'll talk about, that from these statements of the heart, everyone, what they call qawl al-qalb, is that there is nothing that resembles Allah. There's nothing, la shabiha lah. You'll find that the great Imam, Muhammad Ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani, rahimahullah, that he says that there's nothing that resembles Allah. La shabiha lah. Like I said, all these will explain. And there's nothing that resembles Allah. The affair of shabih, that nothing resembles Allah, meaning of his names and his attributes. However, they do agree in the general meaning in certain affairs. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the characteristic of sight, and that the human being has the characteristic of what? Sight. However, that's before the idafa, or before the ikhtisas. And that's only in sentences and words. Like, for example, if you say hand, in the general meaning, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the characteristic of hand. And likewise, the human being has the characteristic of hand. You'll find that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, that he calls that al-mutlaq al-kulli. He calls that al-mutlaq al-kulli. Wal-mutlaq al-kulli huwa al-ma'na al-'am. He said they agree before the idafa takes place in the general meaning, before the connection takes place, in the sentence, of course. But everything outside the dhihn, mukhtas. Kullu shay kharij al-dhihn mukhtas. But anyway, he says that there are characteristics that agree in the general meaning before the connection takes place within your words, which, for example, knowledge. Allah has knowledge, and likewise the creation has knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand, or has two hands, excuse me, everyone, two hands that befit him, and like similar to that, the creation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also has the characteristic of seeing everything, or sight, and similar to that, the human being. That's in the general sense, what they call al-mutlaq al-kulli, which is the general meaning. He says, now when you connect it, when you say knowledge of Allah, Allah's knowledge, and then you say knowledge of the creation, or the knowledge of the human being, then there's no resemblance at all. Then there is no resemblance at all. After the connection takes place. And that's what's only in one mind, or in the words that you utter, or the sentences that you say. But everything outside, of course, outside of your mind, everything is connected with what it's connected with. For example, that the hand of the creation is with the creation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's characteristics is with him. So those affairs are only, like we said, in the general sense of the meaning. That's it. But once they're connected, and they all are connected, there is no resemblance. As we talked about on many occasions, Allah's knowledge is not like the knowledge of the creation, and the creation's knowledge is not like the knowledge of the Creator. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge is complete. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge is not preceded by ignorance. All those affairs apply to the creation. You'll find that the creation's knowledge is what? Incomplete. And their knowledge is preceded by ignorance. They have to learn. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that in his book, in so many ayats. From them is the ayat which is in Surah Al-Nahl, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاللَّهُ أَخْرَجَكُم مِّن بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Nahl. I don't know the number right now, I'll get it after the class. Surah Al-Nahl. And He says, Allah is the one that has brought you out of the wombs of your mothers. You do not have knowledge of anything. And He made for you sight and hearing. وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ. Hearing and sight and a heart, or in hearts, that you may be thankful. You notice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the ayah, what did He connect the affairs of ignorance to the creation? Meaning that you brought out of your wombs of your mothers, and you have to what? Seek knowledge. How do you seek knowledge? By these great senses that He gave you, which is, what everyone? Sight, hearing, and a heart to comprehend. So you can attain that knowledge and remove the affairs of ignorance off yourself, in order that you be thankful for these faculties that He's given you, in order to attain what? Knowledge. But the point of the matter is to let you know that the knowledge of the creation is what? Not like the knowledge of what? The Creator. The knowledge of the Creator is complete. And it's not preceded by what? Ignorance. Allah in this ayah establishes what, everyone? That the knowledge of the creation is incomplete and it's preceded by what? Ignorance. So in the general sense, what they call the mutlaq al-kulli, they agree. In the general sense, before the idafa takes place. And that's only in words. However, everything is connected in the dunya. There's nothing that, for example, there's a hand that just hangs in the air, or knowledge that just hangs in the air. Everything is mukhtas. Everything is connected or with that thing that befits it. For example, the knowledge of the human being and the knowledge of Allah with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the time. So those affairs are only in sentences and words. So but we say that from the general aspect, they are what? They both are the same, as far as in the general sense of the meaning. Before the idafa takes place in the words. However, everything is connected what it's connected to. And for that reason, we say there's no reasonable in these particular characteristics at all. We just gave the example. However, in the mutlaq al-kulli, in the general sense, like we said, in those certain meanings, we just said that they are what? They are similar. No, absolutely. Right, so let's keep going. In addition to that, you'll find in the great Imam Ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani, rahimahullah, as he goes on to say, he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's nothing that resembles Him. All these are matters we'll talk about in a minute. Then he mentions, it says, there's no child for Him. Or He does not have a child, excuse me. And this is what we'll talk about, inshallah, in a minute. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have children. He does not have children. As children, as we'll speak about, is a need. Is a need. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need anything. Allah did not need to die on a cross and then He be revived in order to atone the sins of mankind. Doesn't make any sense. Why does Allah need to die and become human and become incomplete and to be spat on and to be insulted and to be nailed on the cross and then other statements of kufr? You'll find that Jesus, the son of Mary, according to the Bible, that He uttered statements of kufr while He was on the cross by saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? Which is statements of kufr. So all these affairs do not make any sense. That Allah would need to die or sacrifice His only son, as they say. That does not make any sense. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need anything in the heavens and earth. He is self-sufficient, independent fully. He has the characteristic, what they call ghina. Characteristic of ghina. Ghina meaning totally, completely rich and free of anything and anyone. Is it clear, everyone? That characteristic is a characteristic of His essence. Ghina, dhati. And it's a characteristic, what they call sifatun qadimatun qidam al-dhat. It's a characteristic of His essence that Allah was always, before He created the creation, always having the characteristic of self-sufficiency. Always having the characteristic of complete independency and free of any what? Need. Rather, Allah does not have a characteristic of need at all. He does not need the creation. He does not need children. Children, when a person has a child, it's a need. Why? Because you need to continue your what? Progeny. You need to continue your family lineage. You need to what? In order for civilization to know your family or your progeny or what have you, and to maintain that, you have to have generation after generation after generation. That's why people have children, because they need children in order to continue their family and continue their what? Lineage. These affairs are what? Negated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah does not need anything or anyone or to continue His legacy or His progeny in the earth. Is it clear, everyone? So those are the matters that we said. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has no children. If you find that, the great Imam Ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani rahimahullah, that he mentions here. He said, La walada lahu. Allah does not have any children. As we'll talk about the affairs of what they mentioned in the Bible, which is all incorrect. But let's keep going. Wala walida lahu. That Allah does not have anyone that gave Him birth. Or He doesn't have a father either. No one had begotten Allah. Wala sahibata lahu. He has no female companion. That Allah needs to have a woman. These are all affairs of what they call again a need. وَلَا صَاحِبَةَ لَهُ. And He has no sharik. He has no partner. لَيْسَ لِأَوَّلِيَّتِهِ ابْتِدَاء. For Him being the first, there was no beginning. وَلَا لِآخِرِيَّتِهِ انْقِضَاء. And Him being the last, meaning He will be and remain, and He has no ending. All those matters are from the affairs of what they call, what we just mentioned here, that everyone needs to fully believe. This is from the aqidah in regards to every human being regarding their Lord, that they have to believe these matters. That Allah is the only deity deserving of worship. Nothing else. He created. Not a human being, not an angel, not a righteous individual, regardless of their piety and their high status with Allah. And regardless of how righteous they were, or successful people, or rich people, or people considered to have high status, they do not deserve to be worshipped at all. And there's nothing that resembles Allah, not in His names and His attributes, nor in His essence. We just explained this a minute ago. And we believe firmly that Allah does not have any children. These are all things that you'll find that the great Imam Ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani, rahimahullah, that he's mentioned here in these lines. طيب, so let's keep going. So these are from the affairs, like we said, من هذه المعتقدات في الذات الإلهية العلية المقدسة. These are from the affairs of الذات الإلهية العلية, pertaining to that great, high, lofty essence, or that deified essence, who is Allah Himself, that is venerated and high and perfect in every aspect. We know that we said these matters are all from the matters in which all the prophets unanimously agreed. These are from these beliefs. You'll find that there's no prophet and messenger except that this was their belief. Without anything that you mentioned, from all the different lines that we mentioned here. This was the i'tiqad of all the prophets and messengers, without any exception. And you'll find all throughout the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about the prophets and messengers and how they called their people. And the first matter they started with. If you notice in every methodology of the prophets, there's not a single one except you'll find that when they embarked upon calling their people to their rectification, they all tried to make them acknowledge and have the full belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that deserves to be worshipped, and to direct your worship exclusively for Him, and ridding them of all the different types of impurities. And when we say the impurities, the greatest of them is the affair of idolatry. And the affair of what? Polytheism, which is worse than filth upon your clothes, or any type of feces or urine. What's worse than that is one being polluted in their belief. So one could probably put a perspective of how things are disgusting when you have something of urine or feces upon your clothes. You'll find that the affairs that are greater than that is where one's belief is tainted. That is the worst type of impurity. And this is the matter you'll find that the prophets focus on purifying first. The impurities of the heart and the creed towards their Lord, or concerning their Lord. That's why you'll find in all different, or so many different ayat, everyone, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned to us the stories of the prophets and how they had called them and the methodology they embarked upon. Strategically, in order to what? To try to purify them, and to, in addition to now teaching them what is correct in regards to why were they created and what was the purpose of their existence in this world. You'll find that there's so many ayahs. For example, Surah Al-A'raf, ayah number 59. There's so many. For example, we just mentioned one, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed concerning Prophet Nuh, wa Hud, and Salih, and Shu'ayb, saying to them, Ya qawmi ibudullah, ma lakum min ilahin ghayruh. O my people, single out Allah in His worship. You have no deity of worship other than Him. So that was the matters you'll find that we said that all of them had embarked upon. That was their methodology, that was their minhaj, and that what they embarked upon is the affair that will bring success. Any other methodology will be what? That it will be unsuccessful. There's no methodology that's blessed like the methodology of the prophets. Anyone that embarks upon another method to try to so-called bring the people to the affair of worship alone, other than the methodology of the prophets, then know for sure that that methodology inevitably will fail. And it will not be blessed. And the only methodology is the methodology of the prophets and the messengers. Starting the people and directing the people to the worship of Allah alone, warning them from the severity of polytheism and the severity of what? Idolatry. And if you want to say now these days, atheism. Because even the people of the past, even though they were upon idolatry, atheism was something that was extremely strange. Rather, you'll find those matters were weird. But now these days, those matters are now what? Embraced due to the level of education of the people. But if they were to totally and contemplate on the affairs around them, they will come to the ultimate conclusion that there's a deity of worship and there's a creator based upon all the different types of signs that are there. But the point of the matter is, all of them came with the first element that the great Imam Ibn Abee Zayd al-Qayrawani that he mentioned, by saying that Allah is one and deserves to be worshipped based upon the ayat in the book of Allah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explained the methodology of all the prophets and messengers in this affair in which they were unified, and that was the methodology that was blessed, and there's no other methodology that is blessed other than theirs. And what Allah put barakah in it, and as a result of it, it will be successful, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make that da'wah, that call, fruitful, and make it accepted within the hearts. So you'll find that the great, my father, Sheikh Ubayd, rahimahullah, rahmatu wasi'ah, he said about this matter, and when I say my father, I don't mean my father lineage, I mean father in knowledge, where he says, فَلَوْ كَانَتَ النَّبِيُّونَ قَالَتْ لِأَقْوَالِهِمْ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَنْ تَزِدْ عَلَيْهَا لَمْ تَكُنْ هُنَاكَ مُفَاصَلَةً. He said, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you look in the ayah, for example, Surah Al-A'raf, ayah number 59, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, it says, upon the tongue of His prophets, He says, O people, worship Allah. You have no deity of worship other than Him. You'll find that He says, if the prophets would have said only, Ya qawmi ibudullah, and that was it. For example, they mentioned and said to their people, O my people, worship Allah. But they didn't mention the other part. You have no deity other than worship except Him or other than Him. That particular ayat, if you look at it, everyone, what does that say? If you study it. O my people, worship of Allah. You have no deity of worship other than Him. That statement right there, everyone, is La ilaha illallah. You see it? Ya qawmi ibudullah. That's La ilaha. Ma lakum min ilahin ghayru illallah. You'll find how La ilaha illallah is mentioned in a different way in that ayah. Based upon that, you'll find that Shaykh Ubayd, rahimahullah, rahmatu wasi'ah, he mentioned said about this particular ayah. That if it was just mentioned, O my people, worship Allah. He said, and that was it. لم تكن هناك مفاصلة ولا نزاع بينهم وبين أقوامهم ولا كانت سياسة مهادنة ومصالحة فإنه لا يرى المشركون مانعا أن يعبد الله. He said, if it had just been mentioned, worship Allah alone, and that's it, without mentioning you have no deity of worship other than Him. He said, there would never been no separation, nor would there have been no arguments or disagreements between the prophets and their people. He said, rather the affair would have been just a mere type of political muhadana wa musalaha. It would have been a political type of what? Truce between them. Why is he saying that? There would have been a muhadana wa musalaha. Like it would have been a political type of what? Truce and treaty between them. Why? He said because the polytheists, they never seen anyone in the past, of course, especially when the prophets embarked upon teaching their people, they didn't see a problem in worshiping Allah. However, when it says, وَلَكِنْ قَاسِمَةُ ظُهُورِهِمْ الْمُوجِبَةِ لِلْمُفَاصَلَةِ. He said, however, the thing that had disturbed them and that broke their backs to the point where it necessitated separation is when he said, or when the prophet said, you have no deity of worship other than Him. He said that is when the separation occurred. Or the affairs of what? That when they heard that point, that was the problem. Because now it would necessitate that they have to what? Destroy their deities. They will have to what? Fully disengage or fully separate themselves from anything that was connected of worship other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where they will have to now totally eradicate and destroy any other deity. That's when the problem started. So basically the words, as it says in the ayah, وَيَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهِ مَا لَكُم مِّن إِلَهٍ غَيْرُهُ. O my people, worship Allah. That's La ilaha. You have no deity of worship other than Him. That's illallah. So you'll find that La ilaha illallah was mentioned in another way here. Ya qawmi ibudullah. La ilaha. Ma lakum min ilahin ghayru. Illallah. O my people, worship Allah. What's that in the testimony? La ilaha. You have no deity of worship other than Him. Huh? Illallah. Gee, you understand? So the last part of the ayah is in what? That is the affair that necessitated separation. When the mushrikeen heard that, when the polytheists heard that, that is when the argument started. And that is when they started making war with the prophets and messengers. Because they wanted to what? Remain upon what they were upon of associating partners with Allah or taking them as mediators and intercessors between them and Allah. That was the problem. But in its origin, as we know, the polytheists all believed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala existed and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what? He was Lord and He had names and He had actions in which they believed in. But they did not want to now relinquish those deities that they wanted to worship along with Allah. But when the Prophet said that statement, which is, like we just said, illallah or ma lakum min ilahin ghayru, you have no deity other than worship, you have no deity deserving of worship other than Him, that's when they knew that that's a problem. Now you want us to what? Destroy, for example, the psychic tellers, the soothsayers. You want us to get rid of them too? You want us to, and what about the people who used to judge between us, who used to use the devils in order to judge in certain affairs, in our certain problems in society? As we know, that was during the time of the Message of Allah, that certain people, they used to go to individuals who used to use the devils as affairs from affairs of the unseen in order to judge between certain matters. They knew that when the Prophet ﷺ came with the statement, they would have to stop all that. They would have to stop belief in omens, belief in bad luck, belief in certain times and dates being associated with bad endeavors in their lives. That, for example, if I was to sell my business, or if I was to indulge in trade on Friday the 13th, then it's not going to be lucrative. They knew, the Mushrikeen knew that once they said, La ilaha illallah, they would have to stop the beliefs in all of that. That was the problem. They knew that if the Prophet ﷺ was, when they said La ilaha illallah, even in political affairs, the Mushrikeen were very smart in regards to certain matters, not as far as worship, but they were smart. They knew what it necessitated. So now we would have to now stop judging or making man-made laws. We would have to stop that. They knew it. Now we would have to make Allah the judge in our affairs, and now He be the one that will be the legislator for the laws of society. They didn't want to do it. So all of these matters, like we said, everyone in regards to beliefs, they knew that they would have to stop believing in omens. They would have to stop believing in bad luck. They would have to stop going to the crystal ball readers, or the people that believe in the affairs of the unseen, or the people that believe, or the Nostradamus during these days, or affairs of witchcraft. They would have to stop affairs of witchcraft, magic, using the devils, also affairs in political matters. They would have to stop making man-made laws. They would have to stop doing all these matters. That is when the problem started between the prophets and the messengers. So all those matters you will find, like we said, everyone, is it pertaining to what my father, Shaykh Ubayd, that he mentioned, rahimahullah, that he said. For example, قالوا أجئتنا لنعبد الله وحده ونظر ما كان يعبد آباؤنا. They said it clearly in Surah Al-A'raf, ayah number 70. He said, listen to the argument when they heard that statement from their prophet. When he said to them, you have no deity of worship other than him. The people, see, the problem is Shaitan decorates their actions, not realizing that the people will follow what Allah revealed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless them in their lives and give them what they want and more. But it's fear. You know, a lot of people these days, especially these days at times, people are they are frightful and fearful of change. People are fearful and frightful of change. And that even boils down to relationships, where people think they're stuck. I'm stuck. I don't want to get rid of this person in my life. No, certain people need to be what? You need to make drastic changes in your life. But certain people are scared. I'm scared to do that. I don't think I'll be able to do it. So they just stay in the state that they're in, and that's it. Thinking that's what's getting them to the next level, but its actuality is taking them backwards. That's similar to the prophets and messengers. Similar to the Mushrikeen, the Mushrikeen. They think that they're getting far, but in actuality, they're what? They're failing. Even this society we live in, everything is falling apart. But for some odd reason, they don't want to embark upon, they just keep doing the same thing over and over again. Well, after another 4 years, we'll vote for another leader, get him out of here. And you've been doing it now for 100 years. And it really hasn't gotten you anywhere. But you'll find that if you tell them, try this, try the dawah of the prophets, even the Muslims, same thing to follow. Same thing with the Muslims. You'll find that the Muslims do the exact same thing. Regards, leave off the politics. Stop trying to be like the kuffar. Stop trying to be Muslim comedians. Stop trying to be Muslim actors. Embark upon the affairs of the Sunnah. Any questions about the lesson, anyone? Was it clear, anything? طيب إن شاء الله. Continue next week. بإذن الله جل وعز. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك. أشهد أن لا إله إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب